Organizers say the event is tied to the nation's 250th anniversary.
January 2026. Behind the scenes in Omaha, Nebraska, two railroad chief executives are discussing something that has not happened in over 80 years. They want to run the largest operating steam locomotive in the world across the eastern half of the continental United States, coast to coast, and they want to do it sometime in 2026. The locomotive in question weighs 1.2 million pounds and is 133 feet long. It was specifically engineered in 1941 to operate on exactly one railroad's tracks in exactly one part of the country. It has never operated on Eastern Class I railroad territory in its entire operational existence, and the railroad that owns it does not own track to the East Coast. But that might be about to change, because Union Pacific just filed an $85 billion merger application to acquire Norfolk Southern. If it goes through, coordinating access to eastern tracks becomes dramatically simpler. The two railroads would operate as a single railroad, and the locomotive they have been keeping operational for the past 6 years is about to become the single most visible public relations asset in American railroad history. Here is what you need to understand about American freight railroads right now. There are 4 dominant Class I freight railroads in the United States. Over the last half-century, dozens have merged or disappeared. Today, Union Pacific and BNSF control the West, Norfolk Southern and CSX control the East, and the whole system has been quietly consolidating for decades, while most people were not paying attention. On July 29, 2025, Union Pacific announced it intended to buy Norfolk Southern for $85 billion. The company said the deal would create the first single-owner transcontinental freight railroad since the Golden Spike was driven in 1869. The combined network would cover more than 50,000 miles of track across 43 states and would handle roughly 40% of United States rail freight traffic. The Surface Transportation Board, which is the federal agency that must approve this kind of transaction, received the formal application on December 19, 2025. The filing runs to nearly 7,000 pages and includes over 2,000 letters of support from various stakeholders. The shareholders of both railroads voted over 99% in favor. But not everyone is happy about it. BNSF, which is owned by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, came out swinging immediately. Its chief of staff said the merger would be bad for competition and would lead to higher rates for shippers. He said no customer is asking for this and that it is primarily a shareholder-driven deal. CSX filed objections. Canadian National filed objections. Canadian Pacific Kansas City filed objections. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, one of the biggest railroad unions in the country, announced their opposition in December, along with the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees. Together, those two unions represent more than half of the workers at both railroads. The American Chemistry Council came out against it. Agricultural groups came out against it. The argument across the board is the same: fewer choices for shippers, higher prices for everyone, and the very real risk of catastrophic service failures during integration, which is exactly what happened in the 1990s when other major railroad mergers went badly. On the other side, the deal picked up support from SMART-TD, the nation's largest rail union representing conductors, and from President Trump himself, who said it sounds good to him. The Surface Transportation Board is supposed to decide by January 18th whether to even accept the application as complete, which is a procedural step before the actual review begins. If they accept it, the real fight starts. On January 5, 2026, Union Pacific CEO Jim Vena put out a statement about the merger application. In that same statement, he announced that Big Boy number 4014, the world's largest operating steam locomotive, would make its first ever coast-to-coast tour in 2026 to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. He said he looks forward to announcing the tour schedule soon so that Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern employees can bring their families to key stops along the route as a celebration of where we came from and where we are headed. Read that again if you have to. He specifically mentioned Norfolk Southern employees in the announcement of a tour by a Union Pacific locomotive in the same breath as talking about the merger. Back in October 2025, Vina told Trains magazine that he has been having conversations with Norfolk Southern CEO Mark George about hosting what would be Big Boy's first trip in the East since the locomotive rolled out of the Alco factory in Schenectady, New York in 1941. He said it is a little complicated, but he thinks it would be a great historical movement for America's 250th birthday. So the two CEOs of the two railroads that are trying to merge have already been talking about how to make this happen, and they announced the tour publicly in conjunction with the merger filing. Now, technically, Big Boy could run on Norfolk Southern tracks without the merger. Railroads do this all the time through what are called trackage rights agreements. Big Boy actually ran on BNSF tracks back in 2019 when it made a trip over Cajon Pass in California. So the tour is not legally dependent on the merger being approved, but here is what is actually happening. Union Pacific is positioning Big Boy as the friendly face of the biggest power consolidation in the American railroad industry, since the Transcontinental Railroad was completed over 150 years ago. Think about what they are doing. They have an $85 billion deal that critics are calling a threat to competition, a Wall Street play, a risk to the entire American freight network. They have unions representing more than half their combined workforce coming out against it. They have every other major railroad in North America filing objections, and their response is to send an 80-year-old steam locomotive on a feel-good tour across the country for the 4th of July, with stops where workers from both companies can bring their kids to see the big train. This is not subtle. They are using the single most emotionally compelling piece of railroad heritage in America to sell the public on a corporate acquisition. Big Boy number 4014 was built in November 1941 and delivered to Union Pacific in December of that year, put into service hauling freight over the Wasatch Mountains between Utah and Wyoming. It weighs 1.2 million pounds, generates approximately 6,000 horsepower, and was designed to pull 3,600-ton trains over mountain grades without helpers. 25 Big Boys were built. Only 8 survived, and number 4014 is the only one that runs. Union Pacific bought it back from a museum in California in 2013 and spent years restoring it. It returned to operation in 2019. The locomotive has never operated in the eastern United States. It was built in Schenectady, New York, but was shipped directly west and has never gone back. The 2026 tour would be the first time in more than 8 decades that this machine has seen the East Coast. The Surface Transportation Board has to decide whether this merger enhances competition and serves the public interest. Those are the standards set by rules adopted in 2001 after a string of disastrous mergers in the 1990s caused shipping delays that lasted for months and damaged the American economy. This is the first time those rules will be tested on a merger of this scale. Meanwhile, Union Pacific is planning to parade a steam locomotive across America in time for the nation's birthday, stopping at towns where combined railroad employees can wave at their families while the regulatory process unfolds in the background. The merger could take until 2027 to be approved if everything goes smoothly. The Big Boy Tour is scheduled for 2026. So when you see footage of that locomotive steaming through Pennsylvania or Virginia or wherever they end up taking it, remember what you are actually watching. You are watching an $85 billion public relations campaign that happens to have wheels and a whistle.